Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I'm your host, Sadia, and this is my mother, Ima. Hey, Ima.
I'm getting very self-conscious about the fact that I know you're putting this on video, so I'm like trying to experiment with the, best lighting angle, maybe this this angle, this angle, this angle, this angle, this
Well,
angle.
actually, if you do angles above are great for thinning out your face.
Oh yes.
Yeah, anything angles from looking up will just make you look, more weight challenged,
The
as they
problem is that
call it.
my weight challenge. I love that weight challenge. The problem is that my glasses like reflect the light.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe
I
I'd be better off without my glasses on. Okay, this is better.
I mean, it's fine. See, like I look like that's where the light is, and then I'm just trying to like lower the lighting,
Cat,
playing with it. Oh, the cat's bothering you?
this is what I gotta compete with.
No worries, you're fine.
Yes, and she usually loves doing that right in my face. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it means she loves you. All right. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about how do you cope with loss? As you're making funny faces. Um,
Well, I remember in high school.
yeah.
When I was in high school, there was. Let's put this way: when you're in high school, usually you switch boyfriends every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Though there were a couple. There was one boy in particular that I dated for a long time. I dated this one boy. Oh my gosh, an entire year, maybe a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And when he broke up with me, and I don't blame him, I was immature.
Mm-hmm.
I was typical teenage girl, immature and fickle and nasty at times. And finally he had enough and he broke up with me. And oh gosh, I remember coming home, I came in the door and I just started crying and crying. And my sister was there and she had a guy friend who was there and he got very concerned because what's the matter? What's the matter? Michael was the guy. Michael
Michael
broke
left
up
me. Oh
with
no.
me.
Oh gosh. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it just takes time. I think, eventually for breakups, it gets to a point where, you just have to break a habit. Like, you could be with someone for like 2, 3, 4, 5, even 7, 12 years,
Mhm,
and you're in such a habit of being around them that when they're gone, it's kind of hard to break it. And it's like
mhm.
you want to tell them something, you want to express something,
Yeah.
or you just have this feeling like, oh, they're right next to me, and like they're not, you know,
And
like
the irony is that even if a relationship is toxic
yeah.
and them breaking up with you was the best thing that could have happened to you,
Oh yeah.
for some reason, it's still a loss because you're in the habit of being around that person, no matter how toxic they might be.
Well, it's funny you say toxic because it's just like it it's being, I guess, being in a toxic relationship, you feel sometimes, I mean, people, once they get out of a relationship, they have in the back of their mind that they definitely realized it was toxic and they couldn't stop themselves almost. Like I think it's kind of funny when you're in a toxic relationship, you want to get out of it, you're trying to leave it, but you're kind of stuck with it because of previous experiences or subconscious feelings that you've had that you've never really resolved. You kind of stuff down, you know? And then like you're going through the motions now because you built up all this junk. Sorry, you built up all this junk, and now you have to kind of work through it. Um,
I can make the analogy of um, there have been times that I've, you know, sometimes I haven't done so much, but I was into sewing for a while, and then I was into like knitting and crocheting. And anybody that's into any of those things, can tell you that when you see the garment or whatever you're knitting or crocheting is that something's wrong, it is just not turning out. You can either try to work around it and try to work with it, or you can just rip the whole thing up and say, you know what, let me start from the beginning. And this time, do it the right way. And 9 times out of 10, it's like a relationship too. If you're in a relationship that's just not worth salvaging,
yeah.
yep, it's like getting a needle. Really, it's like getting a shot. I hate shots. I don't. I know. I know. I. You know. some people do like them. They're weird, but one of your sisters likes them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
For
yeah.
some reason, yeah. But I always hated shots. But it just lasts for a second, and it's better than catching the disease.
Yeah.
And you're going to be healthier for it.
So we talked about relationship loss, but I know with Tati passing away as a father, losing a father, and I know with you, you lost both your parents.
Mhm.
They were like in their 90s, Baruch Hashem. They really lived long, but it just not being there.
Yeah.
There's certain things and tactics. I guess in Judaism, you get taught how to handle loss. You have Shiva, you have Shloshim, you have Shana Rishona, and then you have Yard Site every year. You have the 7 days, the 30 days, the full year, and then the 1 year, the annual anniversary of their death, and you do certain things to commemorate them. And I guess for me, the one thing I kind of learned was you got to have acceptance, and you don't hold back on your emotions. You have to let them through. You have to feel them.
I remember when I was in seminary, the teacher passed out a copy of an article about Jewish ideas of mourning. It was in the Jewish Observer. And the article was reminiscing how when Jackie Kennedy was at her husband at President Kennedy's funeral, that everybody praised her about how composed she was, and basically just about that she was so composed. And he said, this is not the Jewish idea of mourning. Our idea of mourning is that you need to cry. You need to get out your emotions. This is the time to do it. If you try to like do a stiff upper lip type thing, or try to keep yourself composed, this is going to lead to a lot of neuroses later on because you didn't totally get a chance to absolutely express your feelings and get them out and get over them. I know the Sephardim. Now, Sephardim, oh gosh, when Sephardim mourn, they go crazy. They scream. They fall on the floor. They yell. It's I don't know if we did it in the podcast about a friend of mine.
Never talked in the podcast, and I know what you're saying though. I know what you're going to say.
There was a friend of mine, a woman in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
And she was she was passing away over a number of years from cancer.
Yes.
And when she finally passed away, those of us who were Ashkenazic Jews, it was, we were sad to lose her. She was a good friend, but we had time to prepare ourselves. It was a gradual process. We had time to come over and talk to her and visit and say our goodbyes. So I went over to my Iranian neighbor to tell her that this mutual friend of ours had passed away early that morning. And I was not prepared for the reaction I was going to get.
Yeah.
She screamed. I mean, a loud, painful scream that would pierce the heavens and then burst into tears. And it's like, we Western Jews, I hate to say, I think we picked up something from the Christians in our culture of the type of like stoical, stiff upper lip, control yourself type thing. And she just went totally wild with, crying and screaming. And then I was like, what
do I do with this information? Yeah, it's interesting because like when Tati passed away, I had a lot of dreams of seeing him in a shopping mall, saying to him, I run over to him, I give him a hug, I look up at him because I'm in my head, I'm a kid, and he's like still like the father figure that I remember. And he looks at me, and I just smile, and I could feel like the love that I have for him. And then I wake up in the morning, and like that happened multiple times.
Is he young in your dream? Year. I mean, is he like youngish in your dream?
He's not. He's in his 40s.
Yeah. Whenever I've had dreams about your father, it's always as a younger person, like a middle-aged to younger person. I never have dreams about him as as an older man with, white hair and a white beard.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely see him more. And I mean, I always think about him in a way of like, again, this is one of the reasons why we had this podcast in the first place, is that like I wish I got to know him more. You know, I wish I asked him more questions. I wish I heard him out more. Um, and I was gonna ask you what happened when you lost, Bubby and Zadie.
Um, at first, I didn't cry at first, but it wasn't sudden. And it was towards the end of their lives, they were spending more time in the hospital than they were out.
Mm.
So again, I was very lucky. And I was also lucky with your father. In all three instances, these were very gradual. These losses were not sudden. They were not shocking. They were very gradual, and they were basically to be expected. Um, I remember I did see my father pass away in front of me, and he was in hospice. And my sister and I was sitting next to him. I was saying to him, and we looked, and my sister said, "Hey, his breathing's getting more shallow." And finally, we noticed his breathing was getting more shallow, and then it stopped. And then she called in the nurse, and the nurse, um, examined him and said, "Okay, he's gone." But I remember when this is oh gosh, this is really spooky. The day before, when I visited him in hospice, that night I had a very strange dream. I had a dream that I was in the hospice wing of the hospital with my sisters, and the hospice wing had these two doors that came together as an entrance. And my family was leaving, and I was kind of like lagging behind. And my older sister says to me, "Hurry up, Dad is leaving." And then I walked out I ran up because I was lagging behind everybody. So I had to run up to catch up with everyone as me and my family were all walking through these big doors. And then the next morning was when I got the call from the hospital, you better come over here. It looks like today's going to be the day. And that's when I went over. It was Friday morning, and my sisters and I sat there. And after my father passed away, when the funeral people came to put him in the body bag, as they were zipping it up, I felt like saying, "Don't do that. You'll suffocate him." I
Oh
didn't say it,
God.
but I thought, you still have the feeling that the
Yeah.
person's
Yeah.
I said, "Oh my God, it's going to suffocate." So, what are they doing? Putting him in this bag and, zipping it up. Now, my mother, I didn't see her totally pass away. I was in the hospice section, again, same wing of the hospital, the hospice section. And I was there with my sisters, and I think, were you there or you called her? I think I know
I
you.
was
I
there
went
saying
to,
to Hillam. I was there saying
yeah.
to Hillam,
Uh-huh.
next to not next to you, but like across the room. Like I was in the same room saying to Hillam, you
Because I
know.
remember Yehuda calling her and telling her, basically saying his goodbyes and telling her how much it meant to him to have her as his grandmother. And my mother was laying in her bed. At that point, she couldn't talk, but she had this big, beautiful smile on her face.
Oh wow.
Beautiful smile. She was so happy.
Yeah, because it was over.
And I don't know if she was happy because she saw us all there,
Could be.
and she loved having us all there together,
Hmm.
like a simcha, whatever,
Yeah.
And then it was the next morning. Your Aunt Judy slept over in the room, and Aunt Judy told us sometime around very early in the morning, like 5 o'clock or so, one of the attendants there woke her up and said to her, "Your mother passed."
Oh wow.
Hmm. So that's when Aunt Judy called us, and I forgot what I did after that. If I went over to the hospital, I don't think I had to because the mortuary people, already came, and already took her body. But
Yeah.
when we were in the funeral home, um, they wanted us to look in the casket to confirm it was her.
Oh, wow.
And both of your aunts walked over and looked at the casket, and I couldn't do it. They
Yeah.
asked me, said, "Hey, don't you want to come over and look at mom?" I said, "No,
Yeah.
I just could not come over and do it."
Yeah. I mean, if I had to do that with Tati, I couldn't, I don't think I could.
Mhm.
It's kind of sad, but kind of relieving that it was, 2020 and like everything was so detached. I would call him Friday afternoons to wish him a good Shabbos, and he always was cognitive when I spoke to him, and always wished me good Shabbos. We had a conversation.
We were very lucky in a way. It was not Alzheimer's.
Yeah,
It was vascular dementia, which with vascular dementia, the person still recognizes people.
yeah,
They lose control of their facilities, and they become forgetful in other ways, but they recognize everybody.
yeah,
And all I remember is with your father, like a lot of people said, "Are you okay? Are you holding up? Oh, you're so brave." What it was is that your father suffered so much towards the end of his life, and I suffered along with him, that it got to the point that, I hate to say it, I actually prayed for him to finally pass because he was in so much pain. I would be in another room, I would actually hear him crying and screaming. He was plagued with headaches. I was constantly giving him Tylenol, bringing him water, doing whatever I could for him to keep him comfortable. Um, I remember the Saturday night before he passed away. That's when I became very concerned, like he wasn't breathing normally and his heart was pumping very, very quickly. So I called the hospice nurses. It was 12 o'clock Saturday night. And hospice people are great. They come they're available 24-hour, 24/7. And the nurse, one of the hospice nurses came. She came with an oxygen tank. She showed me just how to use it.
hmm
And I was giving your father oxygen. I was, by that time, he couldn't eat or drink. So I was taking a straw and I was dipping it in water and then putting it in his mouth and then letting a little droplets of water go. And I was doing this like all practically throughout the night. And I finally went to sleep. The next morning, I was afraid to wake up Sunday morning.
really.
I was afraid to come out of my bed and come into the living room. They had set up a hospital bed for him in the living room. And I woke up, remember waking up that Sunday morning and go, "Oh my God, I'm afraid to go in the other room and check." And I did. He was still alive, so I was, continuing to give him like little straw things of water, drips of water. And then his mouth became so tight that I was afraid if I continue this, I'm going to choke him to death.
Oh, wow.
Because he stopped swallowing. I thought to myself, I better
I
not do
think that, I
this
think they,
anymore.
I think someone with vascular dementia, I think they forget to swallow. I think that's how they die a lot of times. That they just forget to do certain things in their body, and they
Mhm.
kind of. Some people said they choke to death or something like that. Like that's kind of how they go.
Well, he was kind of comatose at this point.
hmm
And then it was Monday morning when the attendant came to bathe him and take care of the morning attendant came to take care of his needs. She came over and she looked at him. She said to me, she noticed his face. He's going. So his fingernails are turning blue.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
then finally, so we called the hospice nurse, and she came. That's when we could he couldn't be pronounced dead until the hospice nurse came and actually examined him. I felt
Yeah.
felt the pulse. Like they feel the, what's it called, the cortical what's it, cortex
I don't
post. That's
know. I think
the
yeah.
pulse. It's not the neck. It's that pulse that you get at the neck. And she came and she felt the pulse that was in his neck and said, "Yeah, that, you know."
Yeah. You straighten up your camera.
Oh, That's what you were signaling me.
Yeah, straighten up your camera. It was like angling and like shaking. Like stop, like keep it straight.
But I remember though, I didn't, when I really cried when what happened was the funeral people, the undertakers came and told me I had to move my car so they could move the hearse into the driveway.
Oh wow.
And I remember moving the car out and getting out of the car. And as I was walking up the driveway to go back into the house, that's when I started crying.
Yeah.
When they were taking out the cat.
I know. Yeah.
You want to say hi? So, but I've had a few dreams about him, but and you're right. With each of the dreams, he's not the elderly person. We said that before. He's like youngish. I had one dream where the last dream I had of him, he actually wanted. He said that he felt sorry for whatever whatever pain he caused me in my marriage. And he said he wants a second chance and wants to get together. And he wanted to meet me at this coffee cafe.
Oh, wow.
And so I woke up in the morning thinking, oh, I got to get dressed to meet my husband. And then I remembered, no, I don't.
Wait a second. Hold on a minute. Yeah, I always think about that because I always think of like dreams of people being like communicating with somebody or like Gilgulim, people are reincarnated.
Oh yeah.
I think
we want to go into that.
Yeah, let's get into that. There was like the black dog story. You want to get into first?
Yeah. Okay, your father and I had a mutual friend who his brother, well, let's put it this way, his brother was not exactly a tzaddik. Far from it. So after his brother passed away, he would, during that year, until the Yurtzeit, he said Mishnayos on a regular basis, like every day for his brother. And then after the year passed, he stopped saying Mishnayos. So after he stopped saying Mishnayos, he comes out of his house to go to shul, and there's a black dog, like waiting for him outside, and the black dog follows him to shul. He comes out of the shul, the black dog's still there, and the black dog follows him back to the house. The next morning he wakes up, the black dog is still there. So this happened for 3 days in a row. Finally, the third day, he looks at the black dog and says, okay, I'll go back to saying Mishnayos. And it was after that he didn't see the dog anymore.
Oh, wow.
Then we were talking about when my bubby passed away. Yehud Alev at that time was only 3 weeks old.
Yes.
And your father told me that there's an idea that malachim, angels, are in a shiva house. So a baby at 3 weeks doesn't smile on a conscious level. They'll smile while they're sleeping. And then they open up their eyes and they look around and the smile goes away as if to say, oh, I thought I had a dream I was back in Shamayim. I'm here, aren't I? So I had Yehuda with me, so I took him to the Shiva house and I come in, and the minute I walked in the door, he smiled, but this time on a conscious level. He had this big smile on his face. And he was just looking around and smiling and smiling and smiling. And then during my visit there, I picked up an apple. I said the bracha and bit into it. And the minute I said the bracha and bit into it, he went, like he had this big squeal, like happy squeal. And I know there are many, many stories in Hasidic philosophy of Rebbes telling someone that someone's neshama had an aliyah because they made a bracha over certain, over a certain food. So, could be. And then when it came time to leave, the minute I walked out the door of the Shiva house and closed it behind me, the smile disappeared. And then Yehuda Leib didn't smile again until he, on a conscious level, that is, until he was more like 3 months old. 3 months old is when they start smiling on a real, like a conscious level.
Yeah, there was also, I know it happened to one of my older sisters about you were taking her to shul, and then when
I was sitting in shul. She was only a couple months old, and I opened up the siddur in front of her to the Aleph Beis that's in the front of the Chabad siddur, And I pointed to the letters and I said, Aleph. And she said, Bays, as clear as a bell. And the women turned around and they just looked. And this one woman sitting next to me said, I heard that. She said, Bays. So, we hear, from, we read in Jewish philosophy and we hear all these Kabbalistic ideas that yes, that there is communication between our physical world and the spiritual worlds. But when we see, something happen, it's like, it's like, it's like, we heard about it. Yeah, we learned about it. But the reality of it, like, is really, really is eerie, really scares us in a certain way.
Well, you were telling me another story about this man who wasn't saying Kaddish for his father.
It was when I was a teenager. Friends of mine in school were talking about this Misa. Evidently, it was a big story in the community that this man was like one of the most reformed Jews. You couldn't get any more anti-religious than this guy. And when his father passed away, he refused to say Kaddish for him because he felt he wasn't religious. I don't believe in it. Yada yada. So anyway, his wife, shortly afterwards, gave birth to a baby boy, and so he named the baby boy after his father. And when this little boy got, I don't know what age he was, but he was pretty young. All of a sudden, out of the blue, started to yell at his father about not saying Kaddish for his father.
Wow.
Who he was named after.
What do you remember what Bubby and Zadie reacted when your grandparents passed away?
I remember when I never saw my mother cry. My mother was the type who, if she cried, would not do it in front of us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was one of these stiff upper lip. Except when she got mad at me.
Okay.
Suddenly she totally lost all composure.
Well, look what you've done to her. But yeah, you're saying?
So when her father passed away, I never saw her cry or anything. But then later, my mother said something about there was an incident that happened in our house I'm not going to go into. And she said to me, I never cried so much since my father died. Because this incident, was very, very upsetting to her.
You'll tell me later.
I was surprised to hear her say that because I never saw her cry. When her mother passed away, she took care of her mother. And she saw her mother died very gradually of the effects of a stroke. And she did everything for her. And towards the end of her mother's life, her mother lost all capacities and was totally bedridden and almost like comatose. And she went there. They did not put her in a nursing home. My mother, she was living with my aunt and uncle next door to us. And my mother went next door every single day and took care of her. So at the funeral in general, I think my mother didn't cry that much because she saw how much her mother was suffering.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one of her sisters who couldn't take, she visited her mother. I mean, she was good to her, but she couldn't come there every day and take care of her mother. She just couldn't do it. And my mother was the one who took care of her mother every day. And this aunt of mine was crying. She was crying the most at the funeral.
Oh,
she was the one that, she just couldn't take care of her. And she was crying the most. My mother was the one that cried the least. As a matter of fact, my mother is one of these people who, when she was in the presence of people that were crying, it was like, listen to them. Cut it out. Get strong. Come on, put yourself together. Yes.
What about
my mother didn't tolerate crying.
What about Zadie?
When his father passed away.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting story.
He was actually smiling at his father's funeral and shaking hands with everybody and thanking them for coming. One of my sisters came over to me and said, "Tell Dad to stop acting like he's at a bar mitzvah." And the relationship he had with his father wasn't the best.
Wasn't top notch.
But when his mother passed away, he was close to her. In fact, he used to go to the nursing home every day and play piano for her and sing to her. all her favorite songs. As a matter of fact, Mike Olesker, who was a journalist with the Sun paper years ago, wrote an article about him. Mike Olesker was at the Jewish Convalescent Center visiting his mother, and he saw how my father was coming every single day, playing the piano for his mother and taking care of her. So he spoke to my father about his relationship with his mother and a little bit about her background. And I didn't know this. Evidently, my grandmother, his mother, also was very musically talented, had a beautiful voice. And there were some theaters that she actually sang at, for some performing theaters when
So
she was young.
okay, so we're slowly getting out of time, but I got two things.
Okay. Yeah.
One, if you can tell me Ta's reactions to when Bubby and Pop passed away, and if you can tell me the story about which grandfather got dressed in his Sunday best, laid down on the couch.
Well, not his Sunday best, no, but there was no, we're Jewish. There was no Sunday best by us.
I know.
No, but what happened was my father's father. The week that he passed away, that week he went shopping with my grandmother, and he totally filled up the freezer. He bought a tremendous amount of food, and she said to him, "Why are you buying all this food?" He says, "I want to make sure you're okay. You're taken care of." And a lot of it, he put it in the freezer and everything. Then it was May when the weather was warm. He called the oil. They had oil. They had an oil tank in their house. They used oil heat. He had the tank filled up in May. And she says to him, "What are you doing filling up the tank in May?" He says, "I want to make sure you're okay." Then that Sunday morning, he woke up very early, 6 o'clock. He cleaned the house. He took a shower, got dressed, walked over, laid down on the couch, and like Aharon HaKohen, boom.
Yeah.
Was just boom, gone. Mm-hmm.
So what about Tati's reactions to when Bubby and Pop passed away?
He was, yeah, he cried. He was in Florida when his mother passed away. He was by her side.
Yeah.
And he called me up and he was crying and said, "My mother's left this world." He was crying over the phone. And I'm trying to think. I remember when he sat Shiva by your aunt's house in Columbia.
Yes, we went there. I remember when they came. I have a picture of him and my aunts and everybody else. And I remember seeing him on the couch on his bed when she passed away. I think it was like November time, December time.
That was his mother. Yeah.
Yeah.
Passed away around. Yeah. Around.
Yeah. And he was just lying on the couch, lying on the bed, just like hugging a pillow. And I asked him like, "Hey, are you okay?" And, he's like, "I'm okay, I'm fine." I'm like, and I was told him that I loved him, and I left him be because I figured like I would give somebody their space. But what about when Pop passed away? Because I remember visiting Pop in the hospital with him, and like it was a little different because I think Pop kind of went out on his own terms, if I'm not mistaken. Like he was just more like, this is like, because he had his third girlfriend pass away on him, and then like he's like, "I'm done. This is ridiculous. I just don't want to like live anymore." And
one of the problems also with Pop was that he had a lot of heart problems for a long time.
Oh yeah.
In fact, they used to call him. They said he was like a cat. He had 9 lives.
Oh yeah, it's a pacemaker.
Heart attacks. He recovered each time, but the problem was he was on all this medication, and he had his fibrillator was going off, and it was like he couldn't sleep. It was like every second he was getting an electric shock.
Yeah.
And it became like no use. And he just, he did not, he said to you, Tati told me that he said to him, "I'm going to go join your mother."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And, darn, was the story, darn it, there was a story that we talked about that I wanted to go into. Darn it.
Well, I have the cremation story, the bird story. Those are the two things that I have written down.
Yeah, we were talking about like communication between, say like, neshamas in our family that have, passed. And
Yeah.
the Rebbe wrote a treatise about discouraging cremation. He said the reason is that, of course, we know in Judaism there's 5 parts to the soul.
Yeah. Nefesh,
And
Ruach,
Rebbe,
Neshama. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama.
Chayin Yechida.
Chaynik. Okay. Yeah.
And he said that not all 5 parts go at once.
Yeah. Speaking of cats and 9 lives.
Get a black cat just crossed my path.
Yeah.
And the Rebbe said that there's still a certain amount of pain that the neshama can feel,
Mhm.
because not all 5 parts have left the body together. It's like, it's a gradual process where different parts of the neshama leave at different times. And that's why he said with cremation that the person, to a certain extent, in a certain way, can feel the pain of that. And that's
Yeah.
why one of the reasons we shouldn't do it.
Yeah. I mean, cremation itself, that's why they talk about, people that were cremated in the Holocaust. It was such a devastation. And because there's a certain bone that they say is supposed to be,
Etzem
yeah,
luz, right.
it's supposed to help with resurrection. And the Nazis were very well aware of Jewish Kabbalah concepts, because they took all those bones after cremation, after the crematorium, and they forced the inmates to grind them up and to scatter them.
The story I heard from oh, can you hear me? From Lisa Mengel.
Yeah.
Was that they tried everything they could to get rid of these bones, and they couldn't do it.
No, bones
were so strong that they just could not do it.
I was watching Shoah, the 8-hour documentary, and they were interviewing people, and one of them they were interviewing was an inmate that actually lived through it and told what he had to do, and he had to grind the bones that weren't completely removed from the crematorium, and he was forced to grind them.
According to Nissim Mengel, though, he said they did grind the bones, except they couldn't do it to the etzem luz. That the etzem luz was so strong, that no matter what they tried, they could not grind it down.
Okay, I guess so. I don't know.
And so they just buried it. They said that the neshamas will be re-erected through the etzem luz.
So what about, there was the bird story I think we talked about, that a bird came over?
I have many bird stories, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, okay.
This bird story was a few weeks after your grandfather passed away. Your father's father passed away. There was a bird that appeared on our porch, and it was like going, it was like yelling at us. It was a small bird, was going, like looking right at us, and yelling at us. Like it was mad at us, trying to tell us something. And I came out on the porch, and the bird did not fly away. It didn't get scared. It just stood there stoically on the porch, looking at me, and just. And so your father comes home, and he says to me, "Did you see that bird this morning?" I go, "Yeah." And so your father thinks, and he goes, "Dad?"
But didn't he make Kiddush and then told the bird that everything's forgiven, it's fine, because it came by for Kiddush? I'm trying to remember it, but something like that.
I don't remember that.
I'm getting other story, might be getting other stories mixed up. Because the one that I heard, well, not just this one, but it didn't. A bird came, and would always come to hear Kiddush, and then I think it was another story from somewhere else, though I'm realizing it. And it finally got to a point where the person asked the rabbi said it's probably a Gilgal, and to tell it that it's forgiven, and hopefully that should be fine. And sure enough, before he finished Kiddush, he went to the guy went to the bird and said, "You're forgiven. There's nothing to worry about." And the bird just then flew away, never came back. All right.
That is interesting.
All right. I love you, Ma. God
I love
willing,
you, honey.
I'll see
have a great Shabbos.
You too. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.